Howdy and welcome. Thanks for joining in. Let's go ahead and ground by taking a deep breath. And so what the heck do I mean by ground? Really, that is short for saying grounding into the present moment. It's kind of like we're grounding ourselves, bringing ourselves into our body rather than being up in the clouds or up in our, or other words, up in our thoughts, our stories, our assumptions. Many of us live our day-to-day lives being up here in our thought patterns rather than being fully alive within our body. And we know this to be true simply because it's funny how if we really check in with ourselves, excuse me, a lot of what we experience on a daily basis just passes us by. And so when people stop and really ask us, how do you feel right now? It's almost hard to give them an answer because we'll kind of feed them what the storyline is going on up in our heads, but not necessarily how we genuinely, truly feel. And that is achieved mainly by meditation. And that's what's so delicious about my one-on-one coaching is I help individuals really get into the depths of their subconscious minds and not just the surface level of consciousness that we tend to mostly work with on a daily basis. Again, there's nothing wrong or bad about that. It's just the onion peel of layers upon layers of greater self-awareness. So yes, every time you might hear me say, let's ground ourselves, that is the meaning behind that. Well, let's go ahead and take another deep breath. Delicious. So 30 days sabbatical off of social media that I just came out of. And it was a very cool experience to be had. I got a lot more out of it than I initially thought possible or realized, just because just random things started to manifest, especially 2 weeks into it, that I had not anticipated. The first thing, it's kind of funny though, the first couple of days of being off of mainly Facebook and Instagram, is I found myself either when I'm on the computer or on my phone doing the subconscious habit of swiping and then clicking to go on and check. And that was just funny and scary to realize at the same time that I was just so programmed, my fingers were so programmed to log in and access and check and scroll. And so that was a really cool self-observation. And the biggest thing from all of that is I never realized just how, well, one, addicted I was, but also overstimulated I was. You know, after about the first week, I realized that many of my own thought patterns began to smooth out rather than my thoughts going here, 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 here on a daily basis. They were primarily my own and in a singular focus of my own direction. And I say this because when I was constantly on social media, I'd be reading so much information on a regular basis. And it's not the amount necessarily that was draining. It was little bits from many sources. So, you know, I would read a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, someone's personal life updates, someone's personal opinion on this, the many different blogs that are posted, various news outlets, just all these just little snippets of information. And you know, you absorb it, then you release it. You absorb it, then you release it. You absorb it, then you release it. And I found that it just really was, it was just always touching the surface level of things. I really wasn't learning anything on a deep level. it was almost just like eating candy, eating candy, eating candy. And although there was food within me, it wasn't nourishing food, so to speak. It wasn't a very strong meal. And this overstimulation, I just realized this overstimulation of the constant influx of information was clouding my mind, just like if you ate a ton of candy and how that would cloud your mind and give you that kind of like that sugar rush. It was pleasurable, but then it kind of gives you that lethargy afterwards. And so being off of social media completely, I found that when I wanted to learn something, I would be having a very full and healthy meal regarding it. For example, on my smartphone, instead of swiping and then going into Instagram or Facebook, I downloaded an app called Duolingo. It's a free app, very awesome, I recommend it, where you can learn various languages. And so I started learning Japanese. And so for 5 to 15 minutes a day, even though it was still a short amount of time, it was a very specified amount of time and a very specified activity. I would be learning Japanese. And it was just such a cool thing to realize that, you know, for however many years, I would just be learning surface level things. Because I always liked Facebook. I would try and follow individuals that would post things, blogs and such that were inspirational. But again, it was just combined with so much other distractions involved. And here I was each and every single day growing a new language. Also, I would sometimes go on YouTube and watch a 20 to 40 minute documentary or video, especially regarding Zen, or other people's lives in various countries and how they just kind of experience life differently. And it was just really cool to be plugged into and learning new things that otherwise I would not have been doing, because I was more just in the hashtag perpetual scroll of social media, which is addicting, which there's been some studies done on it, how when you're scrolling and you're refreshing, it's almost similar to playing a slot machine, because it releases that same like pleasurable trigger in your mind, because you don't know what you're going to get. And so you keep refreshing and you keep scrolling, and then every now and then something you see strikes you and it brings you happiness or pleasure, and you're like, oh, that's cool. Granted, you're not thinking that necessarily. And that's just so fascinating that we get that there's the same pleasure release as if you're doing a slot machine, and getting those little amounts of wins the same way as how you're scrolling through, and then you eventually see something that you like, and that brings a similar reward in your mind. And that's what keeps us constantly going back for refresh, scroll, scroll, scroll. And it becomes an endless perpetual cycle. So that's just a slight little tangent there for y'all. But isn't that curious? Let me kind of bring that all together now. Just how taking a step back, I found that my mind was much more focused on a daily basis, much less overstimulated and overwhelmed. And the result of that allowed me to start absorbing different and new information that was more specified to my needs and interests, rather than just being spontaneously found and handed to me. Because as you saw, like with the Zen and the learning the Japanese language, that was of my own choice, rather than me just kind of going through a various social media account and landing upon something that might interest me, but it's only like a 1 or 2 minute read, maybe even 30 seconds. And so this direct learning of choice on my end has a greater long-term effect, because I'm developing roots within learning a Japanese language and learning various other spiritual practices, and even of other people's lives and how they're interacting in other countries, and just how cool that is. How cool that is to be plugged in. So, slight disclaimer, I don't consider YouTube, at least the way I use it, you might be different, the same as a social media account such as Facebook or Instagram, because I don't scroll on YouTube. I never really go past those first 12 videos that they recommend to you, which generally, if you have an account, are very relevant to what you're interested in. So I'm never in that perpetual scroll. I always just type in keywords and find something specific I want to learn about. So that's really cool. Let me go ahead and open back up my other notes. Yes. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is personal connection versus general connection. Personal connection versus general connection. And so these past 30 days, I realized my desire for connection has dramatically increased, not being plugged into social media, simply because I'm not seeing everyone's life updates on a general basis. And so I think about individuals in my life on a more regular basis, send them love, send them well wishes, and think, wow, I'd love to check in with them when I'm back on, or the next time I'm in person, or maybe write them a letter. And I realize this doesn't occur as frequently or ever when you're on social media, because you're already seeing their generalized updates of their life, yet not actually having a one-on-one conversation about that update. So it's generalized but not personal. And I think we take a lot of that for granted, in a sense that many individuals in our lives just become these digital representations of themselves, and yet we're not fully connecting in with them. Again, I think this is beautiful. It's a bittersweet thing, because I love social media and I'm a big advocate and fan of it for connection purposes. And I say this just because I want to share this. What's the word I'm looking for? I guess we'll just say disclaimer. I want to share this disclaimer that I appreciate it, but it's still something to be aware of, so we don't fall into the habit of only ever remaining on the surface level of connection rather than really choosing to go deep. Additionally, because I found myself constantly overstimulated and overwhelmed with the inflow of information, it's almost as if I didn't have any extra time for anyone in my life. You know, I was working full time. I had my marriage. I had my inner circle that I was that I was close to. But then everyone else in the world just kind of seemed to, unfortunately, fall on the back burner unless we were one-on-one together. In those cases, I'm always very present. But, you know, there's been people that have reached out to me, and I wish that I had more energy and time to be more present for them. And all of this was able to shift the moment I unplugged from social media. And then, especially in the writing of handwritten letters, really connecting, which I got a handful of during this 30-day sabbatical. And I just loved, and I especially heard from a couple of people that I had not talked to in years. And so it was just a really, really cool experience. And one individual I actually never even met before, but was always a fan of my content. And this person sent me a letter introducing themselves and sharing a bit about themselves. And that was just such a cool thing, because it was developing a handwritten personal connection. And so it's really neat. And so let's go ahead and go back and reflect upon that. Are we truly developing personal connections, or more digital generalized representation of self connections? And this is just something to be very cognizant of, and making sure that just because we're plugged into social media, we're not overstimulated so much so to where we are no longer taking the time to really connect with individuals on a one-on-one basis. Whew, a lot of words there. Good stuff, though. Let's take a breath. Ah, beautiful. Additionally, these are just a couple little sentences I wrote here. The first one is allow yourself to become bored. Boredom can be the seed of creativity and concise action. Allow yourself to become bored. Boredom can be the seed of creativity and concise action. One of the greatest drawbacks of social media is that you can always be distracted. Like there is something always there to distract yourself with. And so when I found myself not plugging into it, I actually had more time on my hands. I'm not someone who gets bored because I always have a way to do something. I'm definitely a doer. There's always something I'm doing, even if it is literally sitting in meditation. Sitting is what's the word I'm looking for? Intentional sitting is actually doing. It's not. Whenever you intentionally do anything, that is an action of doing. So a lot of people might judge, well, I don't have time, or it seems lazy to just sit in meditation. But in actuality, you are intentionally doing something that is productive for your health and well-being. Slight tangent there, but pretty cool. So allow yourself to become bored. Boredom can be the seed of creativity and concise action. Can be, not always. Sometimes boredom leads people into doing very hurtful and harmful things to themselves and others because they are not the masters of their mind. And so when they're bored, crazy stuff comes in, either like the past abuse starts to manifest, or the present abuse starts to manifest, or the fear starts to manifest, and then they find themselves doing things that are harmful. However, if you're consciously choosing to remain consciously choosing to not do something in a moment and just sit with yourself, and you find the boredom creep in, and you're observant of this boredom, you're observant that you would rather be checking social media to distract yourself or doing something else to distract yourself. This is a universal teaching. It could be anything. These are actually moments of great self-revelation, so that you can get to know the inner workings of your mind and whatever goblins and ghouls are up there that you might be running from. And so I love being able to just kind of take a day or two and just check out, so I can check out from the world, so I can check in with myself. Hashtag that's what retreats. A lot of people choose to go on silent retreats because they achieve that goal. And it is very boorish on these silent retreats because there's, depending on where you go, sometimes there's nothing to do, while other retreats have constant stimulation. But again, sometimes no stimulation is so self-revealing. And I think it was because of these 30 days of not being plugged in, it showed me how much I've taken for granted certain relationships in my life, and it increased my appreciation for friendship and connection. That is a huge, huge thing to be aware of, especially for myself. That is someone who always, I don't want to say, for a lack of a better word, prided themselves in their ability to connect and be present with people. And in this 30 days, it showed me just how much more growth I have to go on that. Additionally, when you are bored, I found myself cooking more. I wasn't distracting myself with social media. And so I took more time to be mindful in all that I was doing since I had extra time. I took more time to eat healthier meals, prepare things beautifully, nourish myself. I took more baths. I meditated and journaled more. All the while, all the projects that I have been delaying on were completed, especially the rewriting of the second edition of Living Peace. So very, very cool. When you remove distraction from your life, concise action and creativity is often the result. Another little quote that I wrote down was, allow yourself to become still and silent Silence is the seed of mindfulness. Allow yourself to become still and silent. Silence is the seed of mindfulness, which harkens back to what we were just talking about, that when you just kind of allow yourself to check out from the world so you can check in with yourself, those self-revelations start to manifest, and you start to see the ways in which you are distracting yourself so that you're not dealing with difficult things, either emotions or conversations or relationships or thoughts or beliefs. We keep ourselves busy. And I love this quote. I can't remember who it's by, but it's like, you know, it's not necessarily a great thing to be busy, because even the ant is a busy creature. So it's more of it's not a question of are you busy? It's a question of what are you busy for? What is your purpose? You know, for example, I was always busy on social media, but in this instance, I became busy with concise learning, with self-directed learning of learning Japanese, studying various documentaries, reading certain books that I began journaling and taking very specific notes on for later videos or groups I might teach. So very interesting, very interesting. Oh, goodness gracious. And then another quote that I'll probably actually include somewhere, but when we cultivate mindfulness, every area of our life improves. When we cultivate mindfulness, every area of our life improves. I love it. Write it down, hang it up on a wall. It is delicious. When we cultivate mindfulness, every area of our life improves. Let's breathe that in. And I think that sums up, you know, this 30-day sabbatical and why it was just so helpful for me. You know, all areas of my life did improve. I became so much more healthy, not only my mind and heart and spirit, but also my body. And there were nights where I really went to sleep in pure gratitude because my mind was clear. My mind was so much more clear than it previously had been in from the overstimulation I was experiencing on a daily basis. Hashtag good stuff. So if you like this video, please go ahead and give a like or a subscribe. And if you want to make sure you get all the notifications on your YouTube account, after you click subscribe, there's this little bell button next to it. And if you click that, it shows, it will always pop up that I release a new video. So that's kind of cool. But next, my next video is going to be going into delusional kindness and genuine kindness. Delusional kindness versus genuine kindness. And this is going to be a very revealing video because I think a lot of us might pride ourselves of being kind people. And so I'm going to be very gentle yet direct on possibly ways in which we are fooling ourselves with our kindness, and how much of our kindness might be more conditional rather than unconditional. Again, it's not, I don't think anyone will get really triggered from this video, but it's probably going to be more of like, wow, I had no idea I was doing that. And I'm going to give examples from my own personal life to where there were times I thought I was being kind when really I was in judgment. So it's going to be a very revealing video. And I think especially this time of conflicts on our planet and in our country, it's going to be very beneficial to hear these words so that we can really start to cultivate more mindfulness and kindness towards ourselves and towards other people. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you all at the next video, or seeing you all, or vice versa. Thank you all so much for joining in for this video. I hope it brought you some inspiration, some insight. Again, I don't think it's necessary for everyone to do a social media cleanse. I think the number one thing is just be very mindful of our perpetual scrolling, mindful of our personal versus general connections, and mindful if we are choosing to allow social media to distract ourselves from our own stuff that was unresolved, or we're truly leaning into that and finding ways in which to transcend ourselves out of that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mwah.